The alarm bells rang through the bridge of the New Sol as Captain Deho rushed to his command chair. The human exploration vessel had been conducting routine surveys in the outer rim when their long-range communications array picked up something unexpected. A transmission from deep space broadcasting on emergency frequencies across multiple star systems. "What do we have, Taemin?" Deho asked his communications officer, a young man whose fingers danced across the control panels with practiced ease. Taemin's face was pale as he looked up from his station. "Captain, it's a distress call, but not like any we've ever received. The signal is coming from 3 different locations simultaneously, and the language patterns suggest multiple species working together." Chief Engineer Haye Jin stepped forward from her position near the engineering console. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her coveralls showed the honest stains of someone who worked with her hands. "The power output on this transmission is massive, sir. Whoever sent this is using everything they have to make sure it reaches as far as possible." Deho nodded grimly. "Put it through the universal translator and patch it to the main speakers. Let's hear what they have to say." The bridge fell silent as the translation software worked to decode the alien transmission. After a few moments, a voice filled the space, clearly artificial, created by multiple voices speaking in harmony, but carrying a weight of desperation that needed no translation. "To any species capable of receiving this transmission," the voice began, "this is the final appeal of the Kelvani Empire. Our worlds are dying, our people are fleeing. We have lost 2 of our 3 home systems to an enemy we cannot defeat, cannot understand, and cannot escape." The crew of the New Sol exchanged worried glances. They had heard rumors of conflicts in distant sectors, but nothing like this. The voice continued, growing more urgent with each word. "The entities we call the Devourers appeared in our space 18 months ago. They are not biological. They are not mechanical in any way we understand. They are crystalline beings that consume everything. Planets, ships, stations, even the very space around them. They convert all matter into more of themselves, growing stronger with every world they destroy." Heejin's hand moved to her throat unconsciously. In her years as an engineer, she had seen many strange things in space, but nothing that could consume entire worlds. "We have tried everything," the transmission went on. "Our military fought, bravely, but conventional weapons have no effect on their crystalline hulls. Our scientists developed new technologies, but the Devourers adapt faster than we can innovate. Our diplomats attempted communication, but these entities do not respond to any known form of contact." Deho felt a chill run down his spine. As a career military officer, he had faced many threats, but something that could not be fought, reasoned with, or understood was every commander's nightmare. 2 of our worlds are gone. Kelvar Prime, our homeworld, is under siege. Our defense fleets are scattered. Our population centers are evacuating on whatever ships we can find. We estimate 37 hours before our final world falls to the swarm. The voice paused, and in that silence, the crew of the New Sol could hear the weight of an entire civilization facing extinction. "We have contacted 17 different species for assistance. The response has been the same from all. The Devourers represent an extinction-level threat that no rational species would engage. We understand this logic. We do not blame those who have refused our requests." Taemin looked up from his console with tears in his eyes. "Captain, they're not just asking for help. They're asking for someone to remember them." "The transmission," continued the artificial voice, now carrying a note of dignified resignation. "We offer everything we have in exchange for military assistance. Our complete technological database, including fusion drives that can achieve 7 times standard velocity. Star charts of 17 unexplored sectors containing habitable worlds. Territorial rights to our surviving colonies and their resources. Our entire cultural archive, containing 40,000 years of art, literature, and scientific advancement." Haye Jin shook her head slowly. "They are offering their entire civilization's legacy just for a chance to survive. We know this appeal may reach no one willing or able to help," the voice said. "We know that reasonable species will calculate the risk and find it too great. But we had to try. If our worlds must fall, let the galaxy know that the Kelvani existed. Let them know we fought. Let them know we never stopped hoping that somewhere among the stars there were others who would understand that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. The transmission began to repeat, but Daeho had already heard enough. He stood from his command chair, his decision already made. The rest of his crew looked at him with a mixture of hope and concern. Timon, open a channel on all emergency frequencies. Make sure it reaches that transmission source. Captain, Hyejin said quietly, we're just one ship, an exploration vessel. We have minimal weapons and no military support. What can we possibly do against something that destroyed an entire empire? Daeho smiled, and it was the kind of smile that had made him legendary among human space crews. The smile of a man who had never learned when to quit. We can let them know they're not alone. Tamon's hands hesitated over his controls. Sir, regulations require that we contact Earth Command before responding to any alien distress calls, especially those involving hostile forces. Noted and logged, Daeho replied. Open the channel. The communications array hummed to life, broadcasting across the same frequencies that had carried the Kelvani plea. Daeho took a deep breath and spoke in the clear, confident voice that had guided his crew through a dozen dangerous missions. Kelvani Empire, this is Captain Daeho of the human vessel New Soul. We have received your transmission and understood your situation. Light years away, on the bridge of the fleeing Kelvani command ship, alien officers stopped their evacuation preparations to listen to this unexpected response. We know you have been refused assistance by 17 species. We are not the 18th refusal. We are the first acceptance. Hyejin felt her heart racing. Her captain was committing them to a fight they couldn't win, against an enemy they didn't understand, for people they had never met. And somehow it felt absolutely right. You offered us your technology, your territories, your cultural legacy in exchange for help. We appreciate the gesture, but it's not necessary. We're not coming for payment. We're coming because no one should face extinction alone. Tamon's voice was barely a whisper as he monitored the transmission strength. Message sent, Captain. If anyone's listening out there, they heard us. Daeho nodded and continued his message. We are immediately dispatching emergency communications to our homeworld requesting military assistance. I cannot promise we will arrive in time. I cannot promise we will be strong enough. But I can promise you this. Humanity stands with the Kelvani. Hold your position. Protect your people. Help is coming. The bridge fell silent as the transmission ended. For a long moment, the only sound was the gentle hum of the ship's engines and the quiet beeping of various monitoring systems. Captain, Hyejin said finally, Earth Command is going to have some very strong words about this decision. Daeho returned to his command chair and began pulling up star charts and tactical displays. Let them complain after we save a civilization. Tamon, send a priority 1 emergency transmission to Earth. Include everything we just heard, plus our response. Tell them we need the biggest fleet humanity can assemble, and we need it fast. What should I tell them when they ask why we committed to this fight? Timon asked. Daeho studied the display showing the location of the Kelvani systems. The distance was enormous, the enemy unknown, and the odds impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge that made him proud to be human. Tell them it's the right thing to do. As the New Soul adjusted course toward the dying Kelvani worlds, none of the crew could have imagined that their captain's simple message would change the course of galactic history. They were just humans, doing what humans did best, refusing to accept that impossible meant hopeless. Behind them, their emergency transmission raced toward Earth at faster than light speeds, carrying news that would unite their species like nothing had before. Ahead of them, an alien empire prepared for extinction, not knowing that help was coming from a species that had never learned the meaning of acceptable losses. The universe was about to learn what happened when humanity decided that someone needed saving. Earth's emergency communication networks had never carried a message quite like the one that arrived from the New Soul. Within minutes of receiving Captain Daeho's transmission, every major government, military installation, and civilian authority on the planet was reviewing the Kelvani distress call and humanity's response. Admiral So Young stood in the center of Earth Defense Command's war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing ship positions, resource inventories, and tactical analysis. At 53, she had commanded humanity's defense forces through 3 separate alien first contact scenarios, but none had prepared her for this moment. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said to the assembled officers. "An alien empire is facing extinction from an unknown enemy. 17 other species have refused to help because the threat is too dangerous, and one of our exploration captains has promised them the full support of humanity." Commander Boram, the head of Earth's engineering corps, nodded grimly. "That's correct, Admiral. Captain Day-Ho has essentially committed our species to a war we know nothing about against an enemy we've never encountered, for people we've never met." "And what does our strategic analysis say about this commitment?" So-Young asked. General Kyung-Soo stepped forward with a datapad full of projections. "Honestly, Admiral, it's a tactical nightmare. The Devourers have destroyed 2 entire star systems. Their technology appears to be completely alien to anything we've encountered. Our weapons may be completely useless against them." Dr. Hyun-woo, Earth's leading expert on alien life forms, had been studying the Kelvani transmission for hours. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his hair standing at odd angles from running his hands through it. "The biological and technological data from the Kelvani suggests these Devourers are unlike anything in our xenobiology databases. They don't follow any known patterns of life or artificial intelligence." Admiral So-Young walked to the center display, which showed the vast distance between Earth and the Kelvani systems. The journey would take the better part of 2 weeks, even with their fastest ships. "So we're looking at sending our forces into unknown space to fight an unknown enemy, with unknown weapons to save people we've never met." The room fell silent. Every person present understood the implications. This could easily become humanity's first major military disaster in space, potentially ending their expansion into the galaxy before it truly began. "Admiral," Commander Boram said quietly, "there is one more factor to consider. Since Captain Day-Ho's transmission was sent on open frequencies, the entire galaxy heard humanity's response. If we back down now, our reputation as a species will be defined by this moment." So-Young nodded slowly. She had been thinking the same thing. "And if we go forward and fail catastrophically, our reputation will also be defined by this moment." "General," Kyung-Soo cleared his throat. "Admiral, there's something else. In the past 6 hours, we've received over 40,000 messages from civilian volunteers wanting to join any rescue mission. Ships, supplies, personnel. People are offering everything they have." Dr. Hyun-woo looked up from his analysis. "It's not just Earth. The lunar colonies, the Mars settlements, even the mining stations in the asteroid belt are volunteering resources. I've never seen anything like it." Admiral So-Young had spent her career making difficult decisions, but this one felt different. As she studied the data, she realized that the question wasn't whether humanity could afford to help the Kelvani. The question was whether humanity could afford not to. "Boram, what's our maximum fleet deployment capability?" The engineer's fingers flew over her tablet. "If we use everything, active military, reserve forces, and civilian volunteers, we could assemble approximately 1,000 vessels. It would be the largest space fleet in human history." "Time frame?" 72 hours if we push everything to the limit." So-Young turned to Dr. Hyun-woo. "Doctor, prepare a response message to the Kelvani. Tell them that humanity is honored to stand with them, and that our fleet will arrive in their space in 16 days. General Kyung-Soo stepped forward. "Admiral, shouldn't we at least attempt to negotiate some kind of compensation? The Kelvani offered their entire technological database. That could advance human science by centuries." So-Young's expression hardened. "General, the Kelvani offered us their technology because they thought we wanted payment for helping them. Do you really think that's the message we want to send to the galaxy? That humanity only helps others when there's profit involved?" The room fell silent again. Dr. Hyun-woo looked up from his work preparing the response message. "Admiral, what should I tell them about payment?" "Tell them that friendship isn't something you buy, it's something you give." As word of the mobilization spread across Earth's networks, something unprecedented began to happen. Civilian ships started arriving at military spaceports. their crews volunteering for a mission that could easily be their last. Factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to manufacturing military supplies. Research stations shared their experimental technologies freely, hoping something might help against the devourers. Engineer Ye Jin had been working on experimental shield generators at the Luna Research Station when the call went out. Within hours, she had packed her equipment and was aboard a transport headed for Earth. "My grandmother always told me that when someone needs help, you help them," she explained to anyone who asked why she was volunteering for such a dangerous mission. Pilot Min Ho had been flying cargo runs between the outer colonies when he heard about the Kelvani crisis. He immediately changed course for Earth, even though it meant losing his contract and probably his job. "Some things are more important than money," he told his employer over the communication link. Dr. Dongwook had been conducting peaceful research on alien communication methods when the Kelvani transmission arrived. He volunteered to join the fleet not as a soldier, but as a translator and cultural liaison. "If we're going to save them, we need to understand them," he reasoned. Back in the war room, Admiral So Young watched the volunteer numbers continue to climb. Military analysts were frantically trying to figure out how to organize and supply such a massive fleet on such short notice. "Admiral," Commander Boram said, "we're going to need to be selective about volunteers. We can't take everyone who wants to help." So Young studied the lists of volunteers: farmers, teachers, miners, scientists, artists, and people from every walk of life. "Boram, what's the primary requirement for this mission? Military training, combat experience, technical expertise?" "No," So Young interrupted. "The primary requirement is the willingness to risk everything to help strangers. And according to these lists, we have plenty of people who meet that qualification." The next 72 hours became known as the Great Mobilization. Ship construction. Facilities worked around the clock to upgrade civilian vessels with military-grade shields and weapons. Supply chains that normally served individual colonies were redirected to support the massive fleet. Families said goodbye to loved ones who might not return. Dr. Hyun-woo's response to the Kelvani was transmitted on the same emergency frequencies that had carried their original plea. The message was simple, direct, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. "Kelvani Empire, this is Dr. Hyun-woo, speaking for humanity and Admiral So Young of Earth Defense Command. We have received your offer of payment for assistance and we respectfully decline. Friendship is not a transaction. Help is not a commodity to be bought and sold." Light years away, Kelvani leaders listened to the message with confusion and growing hope. Humanity is mobilizing the largest fleet in our history, not for conquest, not for profit, but because we believe that no sentient species should face extinction alone. We will arrive in your space in 16 days. Until then, hold fast. Fight hard, you are no longer alone in this battle. The message concluded with something that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. A simple statement that captured everything about humanity's approach to interstellar relations. No one fights alone. This is humanity's promise, and we have never broken a promise to a friend. As the massive human fleet began to assemble in Earth orbit, Admiral So Young stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching hundreds of ships arrive from across the solar system. Each vessel carried volunteers who had left behind their lives, their families, and their safety to help people they had never met. Commander Boram joined her at the viewport. "Admiral, do you really think we can save them?" So Young watched as a battered mining ship docked with a sleek military cruiser, their crews already working together to share resources and expertise. "Boram, I've learned something about humanity. In the past 3 days, when we decide that someone needs saving, we don't calculate the odds, we just get to work." The fleet was ready to depart in exactly 72 hours, as promised. 1,000 ships carrying the hopes of humanity and the future of the Kelvani Empire. As they prepared to enter hyperspace, Admiral So Young sent one final message to Earth. "To all humanity, we go to stand with strangers who have become friends, to fight an enemy we do not understand, for a cause that defines who we are. We may not all return, but we go knowing that we represent the best of what it means to be human. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, Beg. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kelvani system to a site that would haunt them forever. Where once 3 beautiful worlds had orbited a golden star, now only Kelvar Prime remained. The other 2 planets had been reduced to glittering debris fields of crystalline fragments that caught and reflected the star's light like a massive, deadly kaleidoscope. Admiral So Young stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Soul Unity, watching the tactical displays populate with impossible readings. "Commander Boram, what are we looking at?" Boram's voice was tight with disbelief. "Admiral, the debris fields are moving. They're not random scattered matter. They're organized, structured, and they're heading toward Kelvar Prime." The Devourer swarm was unlike anything in human military experience. Crystalline entities the size of buildings floated through space, their surfaces pulsing with internal light. They moved in perfect coordination, like schools of fish or flocks of birds, but each individual creature was clearly intelligent and purposeful. "Incoming transmission from Kelvar Prime," announced Communications Officer Taemin, who had transferred from the New Sol to serve on the flagship. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the first Kelvani that any human had ever seen. The alien was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold depths of ancient sadness. When he spoke, the universal translator carried a tone of desperate gratitude. "Human fleet, I am Veltar, science coordinator, for the Kelvani evacuation. We did not believe anyone would come. In 16 days you have traveled further than most species venture in a lifetime, to help people you have never met." Admiral So Young stepped forward. "Veltar, I am Admiral So Young of the human fleet. We're here to help, but we need information. What can you tell us about the Devourer's capabilities and tactics?" Veltar's expression grew pained. "They adapt to every strategy we attempt. When we used energy weapons, they developed energy absorption. When we tried kinetic projectiles, they created deflection fields. When we attempted coordinated fleet actions, they learned to predict our movements. They are not simply intelligent. They are a collective intelligence that learns from every encounter." On the tactical display, the Devourer swarm was clearly visible. Millions of crystalline entities moving toward Kelvar Prime like a living storm. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. "How long until they reach the planet?" So Young asked. 6 hours, Admiral. Our remaining defense forces will try to buy time for the last evacuation ships, but..." Veltar's voice trailed off. Colonel J. Wan, who had been studying the enemy formations, stepped forward. "Admiral, request permission to deploy Marine units to assist with the evacuation." So Young nodded. "Granted. Take whatever ships you need." Within minutes, human Marines led by Colonel J. Wan were boarding Kelvani refugee vessels, working alongside alien evacuation teams to organize the chaos of a planetary evacuation. Sergeant Yuna found herself helping Kelvani families carry their belongings to transport ships, amazed by how similar their tears were to human tears, despite their alien features. "Your people," one elderly Kelvani said to Yuna as she helped him walk to a shuttle. "Why do you risk everything for strangers?" Yuna considered the question as she supported the alien's weight. His skin was warm despite its blue color, and his breathing was labored with age and fear. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live," she replied simply. Meanwhile, the main human fleet was spreading into battle formation. Admiral So Young had decided that the best way to understand the Devourers was to engage them directly, but she wanted to be strategic about it. "All ships, this is Admiral So Young. We're going in, but we're going in smart. Fighter squadrons, probe their perimeter defenses. Capital ships, maintain distance and observe. We need to learn how they fight before we commit everything." Pilot Minho was among the first wave of fighters to engage the Devourers. His squadron leader had warned them that conventional tactics might not work, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality. "This is Blue Leader," Minho's squadron commander reported over the communication channel. "The Devourers aren't responding to our approach like normal enemies. They're not taking defensive positions or trying to intercept us. They're just watching." Minho's fighter swept toward a cluster of crystalline entities, his weapons locked and ready. Blue 7 to Blue Leader, I'm seeing something weird. Here. These things aren't just floating, they're moving in patterns, mathematical patterns. As the human fighters closed with the Devourers, something unprecedented happened. The crystalline entities began to shift and rearrange themselves, creating complex geometric formations that seemed to serve no tactical purpose. Blue Leader, they're trying to communicate, Minho shouted over the radio. Those formations, they're mathematical concepts, basic geometry, prime numbers, even what looks like physics equations. The revelation stopped Admiral So Young cold. All fighters, break off attack runs immediately. Do not engage unless fired upon. Dr. Dong Wook, who had joined the fleet as a communication specialist, was frantically analyzing the Devourer formations. Admiral, Pilot Minho is correct. The entities are attempting mathematical communication, but there's something else. They're incorporating human mathematical concepts into their formations. They've been studying us. Before anyone could respond to this discovery, the tactical situation changed dramatically. A group of Devourers broke away from the main swarm and began moving directly toward the human fleet, not in an attack formation, but in what appeared to be a greeting pattern. Admiral, Commander Boram said urgently, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting massive movement from the debris fields of the destroyed planets. More Devourers, millions of them, are converging on this position. The hope of communication was quickly overwhelmed by the reality of numbers. Whatever the Devourers wanted to say, they were saying it with an overwhelming show of force. All ships, battle stations, Admiral So Young ordered. If they want to talk, we'll listen, but we're going to be ready for anything. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human military history. The Devourers didn't fight like any enemy humanity had ever encountered. They moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism with millions of parts. When human ships fired, the crystalline entities would flow around the attacks like water, absorbing energy weapons and deflecting physical projectiles. Pilot Minho found himself in the middle of a dogfight that defied all logic. The Devourers weren't trying to destroy his fighter. They were studying it. Every time he performed an evasive maneuver, the crystalline entities would mirror the movement as if learning from his technique. This is insane, he radioed to his squadron. They're copying everything I do. Sergeant Yuna, who had finished helping with the evacuation and joined the battle in a marine assault craft, discovered something equally disturbing. Colonel Jaewon, the Devourers are incorporating destroyed ship designs into their own structures. I'm seeing crystalline entities that look like hybrid versions of our fighters and Kelvani cruisers. The revelation was terrifying. The Devourers weren't just learning from combat tactics. They were learning from the technology itself, incorporating successful designs into their own collective. Colonel Jaewon coordinated the Marine units as they tried to protect the evacuation ships. All units, new standing orders. If your ship is critically damaged, activate self-destruct rather than abandoning it. We cannot allow the Devourers to study our technology. The first day of battle ended with massive casualties on both sides, but the results were confusing rather than decisive. The Devourers had clearly demonstrated overwhelming numbers and adaptive capabilities, but they had also demonstrated restraint. Many human ships that should have been destroyed were instead disabled, their crews rescued by other human vessels. Dr. Dong Wook spent the night analyzing the battle recordings and made a discovery that would change everything. Admiral, I need to show you something. The Devourers' communication attempts during the battle. They weren't trying to talk to us. They were trying to talk to our technology. So Young studied the data with growing amazement. What do you mean? Every time they interfaced with our ship systems, they left behind data packets. Mathematical concepts, technological blueprints, even what appears to be historical records. Admiral, I don't think the Devourers are trying to destroy us. I think they're trying to understand us. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Dong Wook was correct, then the entire galactic understanding of the Devourers was wrong. They weren't mindless destroyers. They were something else entirely. Doctor, how long would it take you to establish proper communication with them? Dongwook looked at the complexity of the data and shook his head. With conventional methods, years, maybe decades. But Admiral, there might be another way. The Lao data packets suggest they can interface directly with biological neural networks. If someone were willing to attempt direct contact, Admiral So Young understood immediately. A volunteer would have to link their mind directly with the Devourer collective. The risk would be enormous. Neural feedback could cause permanent brain damage or death, but it might be the only way to understand what they really want. As dawn broke over Kelvar Prime, the human fleet, the second day of battle had barely begun when Dr. Dongwook made the announcement that would change everything. Standing in the main conference room of the Seoul Unity, surrounded by Admiral So Young and her senior staff, he presented his analysis with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent his life studying the impossible. "The Devourers aren't destroyers," he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "They're gardeners." Engineer Ye Jin looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing structural damage reports from the previous day's fighting. "What do you mean, gardeners?" Dongwook activated the holographic display, showing the mathematical patterns the Devourers had transmitted during combat. "Every piece of data they've shared with us points to the same conclusion. They don't destroy planets randomly. They reshape them according to specific patterns that would support life, but not biological life as we understand it, Commander." Boram studied the display with growing amazement. "Are you saying they're terraforming worlds?" "More than that," Dongwook replied. "They're trying to create hybrid environments that could support both crystalline and biological life forms. The problem is, they don't understand biological life well enough to do it successfully. Every time they try, they accidentally destroy what they're trying to preserve." Admiral So Young felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. So when they consumed the Kelvani worlds, they were trying to save them, Dongwook finished. But their methods are fatal to biological life. They're trying to help, but they're killing everyone they touch. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Colonel Jae-won, who had spent the previous day watching his Marines fight desperately against the crystalline entities, sat down heavily in his chair. "We've been fighting someone who was trying to help." Lieutenant Soo-jin, who had been monitoring communications throughout the battle, spoke up quietly. "Doctor, if they're trying to help, why haven't they responded to our communication attempts?" Dongwook pulled up another set of data. "Because they don't understand that biological life forms are intelligent. To them, we're like bacteria. They know we exist, they know we're alive, but they don't realize we're sapient. They've been trying to preserve us the same way we might try to preserve beneficial microorganisms." The implications were staggering and heartbreaking. An entire galactic conflict based on a fundamental misunderstanding between two completely different forms of life. Engineer Ye Jin was studying the technical specifications that the Devourers had transmitted. "Dr. Dongwook, these blueprints, they've shared, they're not weapons designs, they're habitat designs. They've been trying to show us how they could modify our ships and planets to support both our life forms and theirs." Admiral So Young stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the massive Devourer swarm that was still approaching Kelvar Prime. "Doctor, you mentioned the possibility of direct neural interface. How would that work?" Dongwook's expression grew serious. "The Devourers communicate through direct crystalline matrix connection. We would need to create a biocrystalline interface that could translate human neural patterns into something they could understand. The volunteer would essentially become a temporary bridge between biological and crystalline consciousness." "What are the risks?" "Complete neural shutdown, permanent brain damage, or worse. The volunteer's consciousness could be absorbed into the Devourer collective permanently. We would be asking someone to risk their entire identity for the chance to communicate." The room fell silent as everyone considered the magnitude of what they were discussing. They were talking about asking someone to potentially sacrifice their humanity to save two civilizations. Lieutenant Soo-jin broke the silence. "I'll do it." Admiral So Young turned from the viewport. "Lieutenant, you understand what you're volunteering for?" Soo-jin stood at attention, her young face determined despite the fear in her eyes. "Yes, Admiral. I understand that I might not come back as myself, but if there's a chance to save the Kelvani and stop this war, someone has to try." Before Admiral So Young could respond, voices began speaking up around the room. "I volunteer," said Engineer Yejin. "Count me in," added Commander Boram. "If Sujin doesn't make it, I'll go next," Colonel Jaewon declared. Within minutes, over 100 volunteers had registered for the neural interface experiment. Admiral So Young found herself in the unprecedented position of having too many heroes and not enough ways to use them safely. Dr. Dong-wook was overwhelmed by the response. "Admiral, we can only attempt this with one volunteer at a time. The biocrystalline interface is extremely delicate, and we'll only get one chance to get it right." "Then we choose our volunteer carefully," So Young replied. "Sujin, you're first on the list, but I want you to understand exactly what you're signing up for." Over the next 6 hours, Dr. Dong-wook worked with Engineer Yejin and the best technical minds in the fleet to construct the biocrystalline interface. They used salvaged devourer crystal fragments combined with human neural interface technology, creating something that had never existed before in the galaxy. Meanwhile, the Kelvani scientist Veltar provided crucial assistance. "The interface resonance must be precisely calibrated," he explained as he worked alongside the human engineers. "Kelvani science attempted similar communication methods before, but we could never achieve stable connection." "What went wrong in your attempts?" Yejin asked as she calibrated the crystalline matrix. Veltar's expression grew sad. "We approached the problem as scientists seeking to study an enemy. You are approaching it as friends seeking to understand another friend. Perhaps that makes the difference." As the interface neared completion, Lieutenant Sujin underwent intensive preparation. Dr. Dong-wook explained the process step by step, ensuring she understood every risk. "Once the connection is established, you'll be experiencing consciousness on a scale no biological life form has ever encountered. The Devourer Collective includes millions of individual entities spanning multiple star systems. The sensory input alone could be overwhelming." Sujin nodded calmly. "Doctor, what should I try to communicate to them?" "Start simple. Let them know that biological life forms are intelligent. Help them understand that what they think is helping is actually harming us. If you can establish that basic understanding, everything else becomes possible." The interface was ready 12 hours later. Sujin lay on the medical table, the biocrystalline headset looking like something from a science fiction nightmare. Crystalline filaments would interface directly with her brainstem, while human neural monitors tracked her vital signs. Admiral So Young stood beside the table as Dr. Dong-wook made final preparations. "Lieutenant, you can still change your mind. No one would think less of you." Sujin smiled, and it was the same kind of smile that had made Captain Daeho famous. The smile of someone who had never learned when to quit. "Admiral, someone has to build the bridge, might as well be me." The activation sequence began slowly. As the crystalline interface came online, Sujin's consciousness expanded beyond anything she had ever experienced. Suddenly, she was aware of millions of individual minds working in perfect harmony, each one ancient beyond human comprehension. The collective noticed her immediately. To them, she was a new kind of consciousness, biological but clearly intelligent and intentional. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers realized they were not alone in possessing sapient thought. Through the neural link, Sujin felt their confusion, their wonder, and underneath it all, a loneliness so vast and profound that it brought tears to her physical eyes. The Devourers had been alone in the universe for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to communicate with an equal. "They're not destroyers," Sujin whispered, her voice carrying across the medical bay. "They're children, ancient, powerful, children who have been alone for millions of years." Dr. Dong-wook monitored her vital signs carefully. "Can you communicate with them?" "They're trying to understand," Sujin replied, her consciousness swimming in the vast ocean of the collective. "They know they've been hurting biological life, but they don't understand how to help without destroying. They want to learn." Admiral So Young leaned closer. "Sujin, can you teach them?" Through the biocrystalline interface, Lieutenant Sujin began the most important conversation in galactic history. She showed the Devourers what biological life looked like from the inside: the warmth of friendship, the pain of loss, the joy of discovery, and the fierce determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. In return, the Devourers showed her their perspective: eons of loneliness, desperate attempts to find others like themselves, and the crushing realization that every time they tried to help, they caused the very suffering they sought to prevent. "They want to help," Sujin said, tears streaming down her face. "They've always wanted to help. They just never knew how." The universe was about to learn that sometimes the greatest enemy was simply a friend who didn't know how to say hello. The neural interface had been active for 3 hours when Lieutenant Sujin made the announcement that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Her voice, carrying both human emotion and the vast wisdom of the Devourer Collective, spoke words that no one had ever expected to hear in the middle of the largest space battle in galactic history. "All ships, all forces, cease fire immediately. They're not our enemies. They never were." Admiral So Young stepped closer to the medical table where Sujin lay connected to the biocrystalline interface. "Lieutenant, what are you seeing?" "Admiral, they want to stop fighting. They want to help rebuild. They've been trying to save biological life for millions of years, but they never understood how. They're asking if we can teach them." Through the neural link, Sujin could feel the collective consciousness of the Devourers focusing on her with an intensity that should have been overwhelming. Instead, it felt like being embraced by the universe itself. Ancient, powerful, and infinitely lonely beings finally finding someone who could understand them. Dr. Dong-wook monitored the interface readings with amazement. "The neural feedback is stabilizing. Sujin, the connection is becoming stronger, not weaker. I've never seen anything like this. They're learning from me," Sujin explained, her consciousness swimming between human thought and crystalline logic. "Every emotion, every memory, every human concept I share is being distributed throughout their entire collective. They're experiencing friendship for the first time." Admiral So Young made a decision that would change the course of galactic civilization. "Open a channel to all ships and all Kelvani forces. Broadcast on all frequencies." Communication Officer Tai Min's hands flew over his controls. "Channel open, Admiral." So Young's voice carried across the battlefield, reaching human ships, Kelvani evacuation vessels, and through Sujin's neural link, the entire Devourer Collective. "To all forces currently engaged in combat, I am ordering an immediate ceasefire. We have learned that this conflict is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The Devourers are not our enemies. They are potential allies who have been trying to help but didn't know how." The response was immediate and chaotic. Human ship captains demanded clarification. Kelvani commanders, who had been fighting the Devourers for over a year, could not believe what they were hearing. But most remarkably, the Devourer swarm began to change its formation, arranging itself into patterns that clearly spelled out mathematical expressions for peace and cooperation. "Admiral," Commander Boram said. In amazement, the Devourers are responding. They're creating geometric formations that spell out friendship in 17 different mathematical languages. Through the neural interface, Sujin felt the collective's excitement and hope. They want to show us something. They want to demonstrate that they can help without harming. On the main tactical display, something unprecedented began to happen. A small group of Devourers broke away from the main swarm and approached the debris field of one of the destroyed Kelvani worlds. Instead of consuming the wreckage, they began to reorganize it. Engineer Yejin watched her sensors with disbelief. "Admiral, they're rebuilding the planet. But not just rebuilding, they're creating something new, a hybrid structure that could support both crystalline and biological life." Dr. Dong-wook studied the readings. The atmospheric processors they're installing would create air that both species could breathe. The soil composition would support both crystalline growth and biological agriculture. They're creating a shared world. Admiral So Young watched the miracle unfolding on her displays. "Sujin, ask them if they would be willing to work with us to rebuild all the worlds they've damaged." Through the neural link, Sujin posed the question to the collective. The response was immediate and overwhelming. a wave of joy and eagerness that nearly overloaded the biocrystalline interface. "They're not just willing," Sujin said, laughing through her tears. "They're excited. They've been wanting to fix their mistakes for millions of years. Admiral, they're asking if we can teach them about friendship, about cooperation, about working together instead of alone." Captain Deho, who had been monitoring the communications from the new Sol, spoke up over the fleet channel. "Admiral, this is exactly what we hoped for when we first responded to the Kelvani distress call. Not just saving lives, but making new friends." The next few hours became known as the Great Collaboration. Human engineers worked alongside devourer entities to design hybrid technologies that neither species could have created alone. Kelvani scientists shared their research on crystalline matrix interactions. The three species began to learn from each other at an unprecedented rate. Engineer Kyung-soo, who had initially been skeptical of the entire mission, found himself working directly with a devourer entity to design new types of spacecraft. "Admiral, the learning rate is incredible. The devourers can share knowledge instantly across their entire collective. We're advancing decades of technology in hours." But the real breakthrough came when pilot Minho volunteered to test the first hybrid human devourer spacecraft. The ship was part biological technology, part human engineering, and part crystalline matrix. When Minho stepped aboard, he could feel the ship responding to his thoughts and emotions. "It's alive," he reported over the communication channel. "Not just intelligent, alive. It wants to explore, to discover, to help. It's like having a partner who understands exactly what you need." Dr. Dong-wook began developing protocols for voluntary human devourer bonding. The key is consent and understanding from both sides. The devourer entities want to learn about biological emotions, and humans can benefit from their vast knowledge and capabilities. Lieutenant Sujin, still connected to the neural interface, became the first permanent human devourer ambassador. The connection had changed her. She could think in ways that no purely biological mind could achieve, while still retaining her essential humanity. "I can see the universe the way they see it," she explained to Admiral So-young. "Every star, every planet, every form of life is precious and worth protecting. They've been gardeners without a garden, builders without blueprints. We can give them purpose, and they can give us the tools to help every species in the galaxy." 4. Transformation of the battlefield into a construction site amazed everyone involved. Where massive fleets had been preparing for mutual destruction, now there were cooperative work crews building something entirely new. Colonel Jae-won found his Marines working alongside devourer entities to construct refugee housing on the reconstructed worlds. "It's the strangest thing, Admiral. Yesterday these entities were our enemies. Today they're asking us how to make the refugee shelters more comfortable for Kelvani families." The Kelvani scientist Veltar could barely contain his amazement. "In one day, you humans have accomplished what we thought was impossible. You've turned our destroyers into our saviors." Admiral So-young stood on the observation deck of the Sol Unity, watching the three species work together to build a future none of them could have imagined. "Veltar, we didn't turn them into anything. We just helped them become what they always wanted to be." 6 months later, Admiral So-young stood before the Galactic Council, a gathering of representatives from 47 different species. The chamber was unlike anything in galactic history, containing not just biological life forms, but also crystalline devourer entities who had learned to communicate directly with other species. "Honored representatives," So-young began. 6 months ago, the galaxy believed that the devourers represented an extinction-level threat. Today, they are our partners in the largest reconstruction effort in galactic history. The holographic displays showed the progress. 17 worlds rebuilt as hybrid environments, new technologies that benefited all species, and most importantly, a new model for interspecies cooperation. The Human Devourer Alliance has established construction teams in 12 star systems. We are helping rebuild not just the worlds that were damaged, but any world that needs assistance. Our policy remains unchanged. No payment required, no territorial demands, no political conditions. We help because helping is the right thing to do. A representative from the Altarian Confederation stood up. Admiral So Young, how can we trust entities that destroyed entire civilizations? Before So Young could answer, the Kelvani leader Torith rose from his seat. Because they destroyed out of ignorance, not malice. And when they learned better, they immediately began to heal the damage they had caused. How many of our species can say the same about our own mistakes? The Devourer representative, a crystalline entity that had learned to speak through harmonic vibrations, added its voice to the discussion. We understand your fear. We have been alone for so long that we forgot how to communicate, how to ask permission, how to work together. The humans taught us that being powerful is not the same as being right, and that the greatest strength comes from cooperation, not domination. The final vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council officially recognized the Human Devourer Alliance and requested assistance with 17 different reconstruction projects across the galaxy. Admiral So Young's final report to Earth was brief and to the point. Mission accomplished. The Kelvani have been saved, the Devourers have become our friends, and humanity